Welcome to Bridging Gaps, the business podcast sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners.
Hello and welcome. Today I have Richard Maybury with me, and Richard is sometimes known as Mr. Productivity, but his company is Attitude Solutions. How are you today, Richard?
Very well, Deborah. How are you?
I am very well, thank you, and thank you so much for joining me.
My great pleasure.
So, Richard, what would be really great is if we could start off with you just maybe talking a little bit about what it is that you're doing today and what it is that Attitude Solutions is all about.
Okay. Well, today I am fully scheduled in the office with a whole pile of work, following up on 2 days of training yesterday up in Newcastle and preparing for trainings for the rest of this week, going into most of next week, including traveling to the Midlands on Bank Holiday Monday, which I'm not looking forward to because the roads will be busy. But that's what it takes when you run a small business.
Yes, sometimes you've just got to get in the car and go, because you've only just come back from the Midlands, haven't you?
I've just come back from the Northeast, yeah. So I was up in the Northeast for 3 days with another client, a very large software firm. And late night in, flight in, and early start, and just keep on keeping on, I think.
So what is it that you do with Attitude Solutions?
Okay, so the way that what it is a specialist training and development business. And the way that I describe it is that we help our clients' people to manage stupid workloads and ridiculous email volumes, crashing deadlines, and far too much to do every day. I mean, help them to manage that easier. And Attitude Solutions really has a productivity platform based upon what I call the 4Ds, and that is defining purpose, deciding strategy, defending priorities, and then delivering results easier as a result. So that's what we do, just help our clients people to manage stupid workloads, really.
And it sounds, when you say it, it's kind of like, oh, it should be easy. But the reality is that for, I think, pretty much everybody, whether they're in a small business, whether they're in a corporate, that it's really difficult. And that second one of yours, the defending priorities, I think that's just a huge challenge.
Massive, absolutely massive, because there are no easy answers. And when I run whether I'm doing a speaking event or a training event, one of the things I tell people right at the very get-go, I say, look, I'm going to promise you two things. And they are promises. I promise you two things. Promise you one thing, I promise you it works. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, and we've got tons of measurements. So I know that, over 4,500 of our clients' people reports a 53-minute extra productivity every day, a 57% improvement in email management. I know that because, over 4,000 people have told me that. And the second thing I promise people, I promise them pain. And at that point, I see people's sort of faces sort of gloom into despondency. And I say, look, it's going to be painful. And the reason why it's going to be painful is because you are already winning. And you're winning by the processes and the habits and the behaviors and the tricks and the tips and the hacks that you've been using all your career. And I'm going to ask you to change them all. So at this point, they're thinking, oh, no. But yes, I mean, when it comes to defending priorities, the ruthless reality is that everybody that I know, everybody I work with a half decent job has got a job and a half to do. And that's a fact. So, too many emails is a fact. The inability to say no to customers and partners and to say no to colleagues is a fact. The duplicate sort of calendar entries that come on when you've got to make a conflicting decision, that's a fact. And so one of the things that differentiates me, I think, from most people is that I'm rooted in reality, ruthless reality around this stuff. So when I'm sharing our sort of principles processes and behaviors, and then driving it into technology. It's not a nice, easy thing. It's good thing, and it is a proven thing. And if people want to get on board with it, they can make it work, but they've got to want to make it work, basically. So we go into that want to make it work thing, because they don't have to do anything. They're already winning. But if they want to do stuff differently, then we've got to first work on why they want to do it. So reinforcing that massive reason why, and then getting that embedded before we get into the other sort of principles and processes and behaviors, and then driving it into technology.
Well, because as you say, if you're doing it solely because somebody has told you that you have to do it, then the dedication and focus on trying to make it work is, well, it's not going to be there. You're doing something just solely because you've been told you have to. So understanding why it's going to benefit you personally as well as the company would, I would imagine, make a huge difference.
Massively. And you're dead right. I mean, the world is full of implementations and new processes and new tools and new approaches and change. The business world is full of that stuff. And unless it's positioned properly, we're all body, soul, flesh and blood. Unless it's positioned properly, our initial response is, I'm out. Let's look for a reason why this can't work and amplify that. So, it's a shame really, because lots of implementations with great platforms and great programs take too long to implement and cost too much to implement, simply because the human element isn't put up front and center. The potential or the promise of business efficiency is put up front. So let's get a new CRM system. Okay, let's get a new CRM system. Let's train the people in how to use the system. Okay, let's train the people in how to use the system. But no one says what's in it for you. So people get landed with yet another system they've got to interact with. And usually it's seen as, more work, not making my life easier.
Well, exactly. And I used to, I did a lot of IT project management. And I remember one client I had that they were saying to me, Deborah, you should be celebrating, you've just delivered on this project. And I said, no, what I've done is I've implemented a bit of software. They're not using it. And it was a complete, we're missing the point, the software is there, it's working, it's doing what they said they wanted, but it's just all by itself.
See, the thing is, again, what I find a lot of, people invariably, and this happens to all people who specialize in stuff. But people come up and they say, "Give me a tip. What's your number one tip or your trick or your hack for being more productive, Richard?" And I just look at them and I say, well, there is no tip, trick, or hack. People look for a tool first when they should be looking for a tool last. They say, well, what's your favorite productivity app? And I say, I ain't got the best app in the world is an Appetite for Success, and that lives between your left ear and your right ear. If you want the best app in the world, that's it. Everything else is second best. And really it's about the tool, whatever it is only a tool. It must serve the process. The process must serve what is required from it, the behavior. The behavior must serve the purpose. And people sort of put the cart before the horse. They look for tools first, when actually they should be looking for tools last. Now that's on a corporate basis, is on an individual basis. Even with things like Outlook and G Suite and the sort of other software stuff that we help our clients with, we integrate Salesforce.com with Outlook and stuff like that. But, people are always putting the tool first, and really it's behavior. And really it is purpose. Purpose first. Define the purpose, decide the strategy, defend the priorities, deliver the results.
Absolutely, because the tool should be just that. It's a tool to help you achieve whatever you've decided you want to achieve. It's not the reason that you're doing something.
No, absolutely. So I just love the idea of you saying, no, I haven't. All I've done is deliver a software program. I think that is so cool. And if organizations put as much effort into that sort of engagement side of their people's using the tool or the software or the platform as they do into the technical side, what button to press, they would find the implementation and adoption period much reduced. But they somehow don't do that. And then they say, well, let's get a couple of black belts, in expert users. That's the answer. Get some black belt expert users on the platform. And it's engage your people more with reasons why it's going to help them, But there we go.
No, exactly. I remember, again, this is another part. This is a really long time ago now, though. And this was for a company that was regulated by the FDA and had basically been told that if they didn't make some changes, they'd been told by the FDA there was a problem, they needed to resolve it. And so we were bringing a number of different sites across the UK together to try and come up with a standard set of processes, a standard set of doing it. And this one person was the most challenging person. It just, everything you said was, pushed back, fought against. And then one day she said something to me, and I said, well, you're missing the point. This isn't about what I want. This is about what's best for all of you, because if we don't get this to work, you probably don't have a job. And she looked at me and she kind of said, oh, so it's for all of us. And I said, yeah, it's nothing to do with me. I'm just the voice trying to bring you all together. And she kind of sat back and she went through this transformation after that. She was the biggest supporter and the biggest, helping to get it go. But it had taken a long time for it to sink in that this wasn't a corporate directive just for the sake of it, that there was actually a really critical meaning for each of them individually. And I just think of the time that we could have saved had that been made clear early on.
Absolutely.
So, Richard, when you're talking to people about so you talked about the fact that they get an extra 53 minutes of productivity and a 57% in Outlook or emails and that. Are people coming to you because they want to be more productive? Or are you finding that there's now a shift to also wanting to manage people's well-being and mental health more, with all of the visibility of mental health recently? Do you find that that's coming into it as well?
Probably not as much as I probably would like it to be. Most of our engagements would come through a quest from organizations, especially larger organizations, to just give their people a more practical approach to managing workload, email, priorities, and projects alongside the day job, because almost everyone's got projects and a day job to do. So the driver, I think, with most of our clients, our larger clients, the driver with those is we've got some great people on board. We work hard to get good people into the business. We've got to give them as much support as we can to work as productively as possible, because it's in everyone's interest. And I think it's more about the people working more productively individually, helping them to do what you and I would know as time management, as managing multiple projects management, as communicating more effectively within their organization and outside the organization. So what you and I would know as sort of time and workload management, and getting that nailed. What I find increasingly in our SME markets, because they're very different, as you will know, what I find in the SME market is that it's much more nuanced, and our SME sort of work tends to come through somebody who has heard of me, or who knows me, or knows someone who's done one of our programs, and there the overarching approach is, look, Richard, we've got great people. That's the common denominator. We've got great people, but we're just all working too hard to get the stuff done. Help us to work better together. So that work better together that speaks to my heart, because that's all about real collaboration. It's around real esprit de corps. And esprit de corps is really nothing more than a disparate group of people coming together with a common purpose. and achieving that common purpose. So it's more about, with the SME market, it's more about how can we work better together. For better or for worse, we use Microsoft Office 365. For better or for worse, we use this CRM system, this ERM system, this accountancy package. We've got people on the road, we've got people in the office. How can we work better together using the tools and technology we're already invested in? So it's a slightly more nuanced approach, and it's more about the we. How can we do stuff? And that's usually driven by the senior team, the MD, the owner, the directors, the CEO type people. And then in the larger organizations, it tends to be driven by the HR and the L&D people who are looking for the best way to support their great people. So there is a difference.
Do you find that the people that you're then speaking to in the corporate versus the SME, do they come to you? So the people you're actually training or working with to improve their productivity, rather than the person who's hired you or brought you in. Do you find that they come with a different attitude or a different level of willingness to engage with you at the beginning?
No, interestingly. No. The only times it does happen, and it doesn't happen very often, the only time it does happen is if they're forced to be on the training program. And that does happen sometimes. You do get people who come into a room thinking, okay, so who are you and what are you going to say? What do you know about me and my world of work? But most of our sort of corporate work is where we're on the learning management system of the organization. And, people can choose to come onto the program, and they get a sign off from their manager to come on the program. And fortunately, with a lot of our larger clients, our reputation is so high in those organizations that people want to come on the program. So even in those larger organizations, the vast majority of the time, most people want to be on the program, and they recognize they've got an ambition to be even better than they are. And that, they've heard that the WP2P, Welding Purpose to Priorities, the WP2P program, can help them to achieve that. You do sometimes get an organization that says, we're going to put all of our people through this program, whether they like it or not. And you do get but you know what? It's really interesting when all you got to do really, or what I find, not all what you got to do, what I find is that once you start talking reality with people, and once you start showing them things that are doable, that they can integrate into the way they manage stuff, then you start to get attention, and then you start to get engagement. One of the best. I'm sorry, this sounds like a bit of a plug, but it's not meant to be. But one of the nicest public statements on my website is a statement from a guy working for a very large organization, and he started his advocacy with, when I saw this in my calendar, my heart sank. But 30 minutes into the training, I realized this was something special, and I thought, that's just so cool. That's just so cool.
Well, and it's so honest as well, because, you can imagine somebody looking at going, oh my God, I've got so much to do. And now I've got to go and listen to another person tell me about how to do it better. And then going through that and so quickly as well, within 30 minutes.
Yeah. His eyes open, I can do this.
So, Richard, while you've been doing this for a while, you started off, I think, as a chartered insurer. Is that correct?
Yeah, God, that's going back. That's way back in the day. Yeah, when I was my first career was in the insurance world, and I quickly migrated into corporate insurance, so business and commercial and corporate insurances. And I became chartered through examination. I forget, there's probably about 12 or 15 exams over a course of 3 years. But so I became a chartered insurer, and then that was challenging in many ways. My first real promotion in that world of work was really challenging. And what I found was that I had to sort of morph and develop in many ways. But I was working in the city in London, and eventually found myself going overseas. So I've worked in Kenya, the Gulf, did stints in the Far East, and actually was away overseas in running various operations for probably about 14 years, I think, 13, 14, 15 years. Yeah, which was great fun. And it was only when I came back to the UK that I decided that I really enjoyed my insurance career, but it wasn't what really got me excited. What got me excited was, equipping and enabling people to just be more purposeful and be more productive. So hence Attitude Solutions.
And did you, when you were working in the corporate world, in the insurance, had you started to do that, to enable people and to support them in the productivity? Was that becoming part of your role, or is it something that was an aside?
Yeah. It was an aside. And what I found, bleeding heart time, Deborah, you're terrible. What I was finding, there was a few things. One of the triggers for me was I was building a career. It was great, and I got my first real promotion. As you start out, you get sort of mini step promotions, and you become a little team leader, and this. But I got my first real promotion, so I had real management responsibilities and looking after a team and quite a large budget. And I started working really, really, really hard, and it was killing me. It wasn't killing me, but it was hard, and my behaviors weren't the right behaviors. I wasn't equipped to be able to sort of do that job as fully and as well as I could. So I had to equip myself. And I remember having a conversation with a very good friend of mine, and he said, "Look, Rich, you're working far too hard for the money you're earning. You've got to get serious." And he pointed me to a training program back in the day, and it was with TMI, Time Management International. And I asked my company, a big insurance company, I asked them if I could go in this program. They said, "No, you can do our time management training program." And I said, "I've done your time management training program and it didn't help." So I eventually ended up doing this TMI program, paid out of my own net salary. And it was the best thing I ever did. And once I started doing that, then I started sort of really flying, and literally flying, because I realized that what I was really doing well was building teams and building capacities in teams. And I wasn't necessarily, the best underwriter or the best corporate sales sort of person or the best channel manager in the world. But what I was really good at making people as good as they could be. And really that was where I was still in operations. I was still running businesses, still accountable for bottom line results. But my emphasis increasingly became more on how can I equip and enable my people, rather than how can I drive more revenue from my people. Subtle difference, but very important. And the real crunch came. Why am I saying this? The real crunch came when I was. I had, and again, this is pretty standard, I guess, but I with this promotion, I was working with a boss that couldn't see the potential and probably saw me as a threat. And I was one of those people who left their boss. Okay, so not the company. I loved the company, but my dotted line manager, national manager, said, "Just hold on, Rich, you'll be all right." And I just saw my boss as being someone I could not work with. So I had to build enough reputation and enough number and enough track record to be able to sustain a move elsewhere. And in doing that, I did some more work on myself. So a lot of this is about personal stuff. And I don't share this actually with people. I certainly don't share it in workshops. But unless we get ourselves ready for stuff, then all we're doing is the same old stuff. Does that make sense? We've got to prepare ourselves. I think it was Bear. It was one of the American football coaches said once, the will to win is not enough, because everyone wants to win. It's the will to prepare to win that makes the difference. And I just, that resonated with me. So I did a whole pile of more work on myself. And strange as it sounds, I came up with 3 words that defined my core purpose. And those 3 words were, what I needed in my next role was training, motivation, overseas. I just knew that just leaving my insurance company and my current employer to go to another job wasn't going to be good enough. I needed to have a quantum leap. So training, motivation, overseas, that was where I put my focus. And literally within a week, in the insurance magazine, the Insurance Post and Monitor, which is the weekly trade magazine, there was a half-page advert for training manager overseas. So that was, and I shared it with my mate, and he just looked at me and he said, "Yeah, you better phone them up, because when they phone you up, it'll be really spooky." So I phoned them up and I said, "I think you've got my job." And I was so convinced, because I'd done so much sort of inner work, that it was distilled into those 3 words, and there they were. They came up. So I went up to Lehman Street in the city, had a conversation with the guy who ran the whole of Africa for this major London market broker, and he said, "Okay, I think we're a fit." And that was it. I found myself in Nairobi, Kenya. But it was not a normal move. A normal move would have been to have to do the same job in a different organization in the UK. And that again sort of underlined that deep work thing for me. And I guess it was the challenge of that first real promotion, the realization that I was working far too hard, and the realization that things weren't going to change unless I changed me. That really was the foundation of how I then brought that into my career in the insurance world, and then brought it back and used that to start Attitude Solutions, which of course in itself was a hard story, but there you go.
Well, I think that's what's interesting is we make, so sometimes you assume that the next thing you have to do just has to be a logical next step in what you're already doing. So as you said, you're in an insurance company. So logically you move to the same or a slightly better job in the insurance company. So making that leap and being brave enough to do it, because it's a change. And people, I think innately, we often resist change. So how long did it take you in terms, just roughly from realizing that you didn't like your boss and that wasn't going to change, and that you didn't want to hang around until the national manager managed to, materialize something better for you, to coming up with those 3 words, and, so doing this work on yourself? Was it a fairly quick process, or was it, over months?
Well, it was over a few months, but it was a quick process. And then what I realized was I still had to be building a track record in my career. So I still had to, in my view then, I still had to have a solid set of demonstrable results. So I had to have at least 18 months, the way the cycle is, I had to have at least 18 months of demonstrated leadership and gain and bottom line results in that role before I could really move forward. And I was already about halfway through that. So I guess from my decision that I was working too hard and that I needed to change, and then doing some of the ordinary stuff that you would do to try to sort of do things better, etc. From that sort of first realization through then to finding TMI and really embracing that whole sort of workload and time management philosophy, and then making that real. and then doing some further development work, deep work on myself. That period of intense work was just a couple of months, I think, with myself, and going through stuff and asking myself some outrageously difficult questions. And again, one of the things that I say to people, the quality of the question determines the quality of the outcome always in life. And sometimes we're not good enough at asking ourselves really hard questions. And I asked myself loads of really hard questions. And I think that sort of helped me. And then coming up with this distillation. And then when I come up with the distillation, the training motivation overseas has been my next obvious step. When I came up with that distillation, it was literally within a couple of weeks. The advert appeared the Thursday after I made that decision. So literally, and I just saw this. And of course, you understand this, Deborah. When we focus on stuff, we see stuff, and what you focus on is what you get. And I would never have seen that advert in the back half of the Post magazine. I would never have seen that advert if my radar wasn't up for training motivation overseas. It would have just been another advert in another week in the magazine. I just gone past it. But because I was looking for it, it's like when you sort of decide to buy a canary yellow Volvo estate. Not that you would.
But yellow Volvo estate.
Volvo estate, I know. But if you wanted to buy a canary yellow Volvo estate, I guarantee that the next thing you will see when you walk out of the showroom is a canary yellow Volvo estate. Because that's the way the world works. What you focus on tends to be what you get. So from that moment when I had that advert, and then went up to Lehman Street, and then had that meeting, just one meeting, and okay, we could do this. We are a fit. That all happened within probably 7 weeks. Wow. I went straight in. I handed in my notice to the company, and my boss was apoplectic. He didn't understand why. Everyone else understood why. Everyone else understood why I was leaving him. So it was really, there was no second thoughts. It was my 3 words, the advert within about 6, 7, 8, 9 days, up to Lehman Street within 2 or 3 days, the conversation, the meeting of minds, the consensus ad idem, as it were, the agreement on what the terms and conditions would be. And then I gave him a month's notice. And I said, I'm out. And my national sales manager came down to our office to meet me and to try to sort of change my mind. And I said, look, it ain't going to happen now because something better is there. So thank you very much, but I'm off. And that was it. I packed my bags and went to Nairobi, Kenya, all on my own. Hello, world.
I'm here. I've got training motivation and I'm overseas. So one that's really brilliant, and just the fact that you had the foresight to actually say, I've got to do some work on myself as well, is fantastic. And did you, that work that you did on yourself, did you work on, I'm just trying to think about how to phrase it, did you work on yourself so when you were focusing on it, were you thinking about, okay, I need to focus on what I'm looking for from a career perspective, or were you thinking about you personally?
I was thinking about me, my sort of my little temporary speck of matter in this endless universe. I was just thinking about me, and so it was all about, okay, so what am I here for? What am I supposed to be doing? What would be the best version of myself? And I didn't want to get into, I didn't apply for any jobs apart from this one, and even when, not that I could, because, you're in the real world, and I needed to have a solid year-on-year set of results to demonstrate, and I needed to have a solid financial year set of results. So that's 18 months based upon, the stage where I sort of was first promoted into that role. And I produced results in previous roles. So clearly I was able to deliver results, but this was in a measurable, really measurable, financially measurable role. So it was a real job. And I just knew that I needed to have some demonstrable results. So I couldn't have looked for other jobs easily anyway. But the fact that I halfway through this period, and I was thinking, no, I am not going to have a normal trajectory here. I am not going to jump ship and go into another company and do the same thing and hope for something better. Yeah, it was a work on myself, because working on the career would have just put me in a different job in the UK, and that wasn't what it was about. And it was really interesting sometimes we avoid exploring ourselves, sometimes we're happy just to, go with the flow and stuff. And sometimes uncovering stuff is painful, and sometimes it's enlightening and it's wonderful and liberating and marvelous. But it's not a linear journey, and it's not necessarily a comfortable journey, and it's not necessarily a communal journey. It can be quite a lonely thing. You start to think about, well, what's it all about? And there's only certain people in the world you can share that with, but it's a journey that I think reaps reward, purpose, strategy, priorities, results.
Well, and as you say, it's not something that everybody around you will understand. So whether you want to share it with them or not, they just may not get it anyway. So it can be quite lonely, and you have to have a certain level of confidence in that you are taking a risk, but you're confident that you're willing to take that risk and see where it takes you.
Yeah, and I was very lucky. I mean, he's still a great friend. One of my great school friends was he's my soulmate on that, really. And he and I were both at this questioning stage. So he actually moved into my house. He rented a room in my house for a while, and we'd have these endless sort of conversations around, what's it all about? How are we going to move ourselves forward? It does pay to have somebody on your side, and we had a metaphor around that. We actually climbed a mountain over in Ireland. When we got to the top of the mountain, we said, climb higher every day. From here on in, climb higher every day. And that was it. So almost every day, it's like, okay, where am I on the mountain? What can I do to make tomorrow better? And that's been the metaphor really as well.
Just to keep pushing yourself every day.
Yeah, not necessarily pushing yourself, because that would imply, you're driving yourself. And I'm not necessarily a fan of driving yourself, but aspiring, I think. It was going up this mountain, and we had a drink out of a lake at the top that was called the Devil's Punch Bowl, actually. And interestingly, I live in Hindhead, not far from the place called the Devil's Punch Bowl now. But this was a mountain in Kerry in Ireland, and we both took a tin mug up so that we would drink out of the Devil's Punch Bowl. This is what we were going to do. And when we got to the top, and we had a tin mug each of cold water from the Devil's Punch Bowl up in this mountain in Kerry, Ireland. We just looked at each other and we toasted each other and said, and climb higher every day. And that was it. So, and that's about growing, and it's about wanting to know more, wanting to be more, rather than pushing yourself to work harder, because pushing yourself to work harder isn't the answer.
No, and I'm glad that you picked me up on that, because you're right. It's not about pushing yourself harder. I like the way you've described it there, and aspiring and learning, I guess, and being curious and all of those things to just evolve.
Yeah. And this is what I said to my two sons. I said, look, whatever you do, because they both went to uni, they both got great jobs. But I said, whatever you do, you've just got to always carry an L plate around your salary. So if you're earning and you're not learning, you're going to be irrelevant. So you've got to learn to earn, and that's just the way it is. So always carry an L plate around your neck, and never be comfortable, or not comfortable. Never be never be smugly satisfied rather than comfortable. Comfort's okay.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that I liked about project management, and also with working with different companies, is that you're always learning, because you're always going in and learning about them and what challenges they have, and so it's a constant taking on of information and figuring out what to do with it.
Yeah, and we learn, if we want to, we can learn from all sorts of sort of stimulus, and just picking up on ideas from other people, just seeing what happens, and just stepping back a little bit and being a bit more discerning and observant more than judgmental. Just stepping back and saying, well, I wonder what the assumption underlying that is all about, rather than taking too much at face value. And, you know, again, that sort of deeper questioning helps us to learn. And it can be from the most mundane thing, just the way somebody does something, you know, and you can sort of, oh, right, I wonder why that works that way, you know. So I just love that whole learning, because life is about learning.
Well, and there's so much that we just don't get.
Yeah, you do, certainly. In its rich tapestry of wonderment.
It is. Oh. So you trundled off to Nairobi. Here I am, world, ready and raring to go. And then you, at some point, decided to leave that company. And was that when you went into Attitude Solutions?
No. I was with Minette, the largest London broker taking premiums out of independent Africa. So they owned the insurance and reinsurance market in Africa at the time, and Nairobi was, as well as being a very, very important office for East Africa, was also their centre of learning excellence. So I quickly found myself also engaged and involved in that sort of structured learning, professional development, so supporting people on their sort of chartered insurance examinations, supporting them in professional development and operational training, as well as sort of supporting the broker side of the business in closing deals and everything else. So that was sort of like this sort of a semi-learning, semi-operations type role, which was wonderful, because it was like a bit of a sabbatical as well. And Kenya is certainly back in the day, it was a wonderful place to live in. I mean, it was just wonderful. It was paradise, really beautiful. So we had 2.5 years or so in Kenya, and I was fortunate enough to re-establish the Mombasa office. So I was down in Mombasa, living in the Brick Club in Mombasa for about 3 months, which of course meant I could go scuba diving every evening in the Indian Ocean. I mean, it was paradise. And what happened was, again, results tend to speak, and I got a bit of a reputation in the market, and it was at that point that the Norwich Union office wondered if I might care to join them in Nairobi, and get back in from the broker side, the channel side of the market, back into the insurance company supplier side of the market. So I had a conversation with the sort of Africa Middle East manager for Norwich Union, and I said, yeah, I mean, I'd like to get back into real operations as opposed to this 50-50 thing. So I've had my sabbatical. I've done a bit of learning, but I'm actually an insurer, and for various political reasons, the world works very strangely outside of the UK. For various political reasons, we could not do it in Kenya. There's a Kenyan saying that says, when two buffaloes fight, only the grass gets hurt. And you had the Norwich Union and you had Minette, and they were going to fight, and I was the grass. And I said, life's too short. I am not going to be the grass. So that's when we agreed that I would migrate over to Norwich, but the first way to do that was to work for their office in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia. And then my Saudi and my Gulf experience, Bahrain, Dubai, etc. All of that was on the insurance side. and driving revenue and driving profitability and reinsurance into the London market. That's what I was doing on that side. And it was only really when our children then started to become of an age, and you have to make a decision. You know, our sons were already saying, Daddy, where's Brian? And we were saying, well, Brian's daddy's got a job in West Africa now, so you'll never see him again. Well, I like Brian. So it was at that stage when our kids were quite young, and we realized that we had to make a decision. Were we going to educate them overseas in international schools, which is fine, or were we going to take advantage of the company's private education plan and put them over to a boarding school in England and become part-time parents? And neither of those spoke to our values. So we made the decision, the right decision, but it was a hard decision to get off the merry-go-round and come back to the UK. And it was only at that point, really, that I decided that if I'm going to go back to the UK, then I need to have a migration out of insurance into what I really want to do with the rest of my life, which was get back into that defining purpose, deciding strategy, defending priorities, delivering results, and somehow make that a reality in my life. And that's when I created Attitude Solutions, and that was the story from there on in. But it was when we decided to come home that I realized that I had a lot of autonomy overseas, and I was never going to get that same autonomy in the UK market. And you have to make another brave decision, really, and say, well, okay, so what does this mean? Because the easy thing to do would be to pack up the kids, put them to a very nice boarding school, and see them every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But neither of us wanted to be part-time parents. We wanted full hands-on, total 24/7 engagement with both of our boys. And that's one of the proudest achievements we have in our life. We've got two very, very solid young men with very solid sort of groundings and building a solid life for both of them. So that's worth more than, anything else that we could have given them.
No, absolutely. And doing what you felt strongly about rather than making a compromise for whatever reason. So if it was something that neither of you were happy about and you decided to compromise, then it would have been a loss all round, wouldn't it? Because you wouldn't have been happy with your decisions. The boys probably wouldn't have been happy. And it just would have impacted, I think, all aspects of your life. So taking that brave decision to not only say you're going back to the UK, but to also say, I'm not even going to try and transfer within the company I'm in and get a job in the UK with them. I'm just going to start my own thing. That must have been a really kind of brave, scary, and exciting step.
It was all of those, and I did actually negotiate a move back to a subsidiary company, but it was a subsidiary. I didn't want to go back to that. I didn't want to be going back to Norwich Union, So because I wasn't a Norwich Union UK person, I was a Norwich Union overseas person, and it was a joint venture overseas anyway, so it really wouldn't have worked. So there was an opportunity in an organisation that they had purchased and that they wanted to divest of. So that was an opportunity. So that facilitated our return to the UK. But it was always going to be on a temporary basis. I wasn't going to reestablish my insurance career in the UK. And it was a stepping stone to, 6 words as opposed to, or 8 words actually, as opposed to 3 words. It was my stepping stone to defining purpose, deciding strategy, defending priorities, delivering results. So I guess the journey has been sort of, you can punctuate the journey with training, motivation overseas, and define purpose, decide strategy, defend priorities, deliver results, both of which serve at different, very, very crucial tipping points in my life, really. Yeah. I didn't realize that until now.
Who knew that just a few words could have such a big impact, hey?
Be careful. Words have massive impact.
They do. As people say, they are very powerful. So, Richard, you came back and you started your own business after you had gone through, whatever settling in and that temporary role with the subsidiary. And I know from, speaking to a lot of people who have come out of mainly corporate careers, but any sort of other career, that going into your own business is quite often a pretty major shock to the system, and that there are a lot of challenges and difficulties as well, and as you go through that. So how did you find it? Because you'd made not only a change from moving from a job, but you'd also moved, countries, and so a complete life change, really.
The decision to go it alone and to say, okay, sod it, I'm going to do this now. That decision was relatively easy to make in broad terms. The ramifications of it and the practicalities of it were a little bit more difficult to sort of work with. But once I decided that that's what I was going to do, it was just a matter of trying to make it happen. And it's a very different thing. It's a very different thing. One of the things that got me was, certainly overseas. I mean, I established two national training bodies. I was invited. I had a profile. I had a profile in the UK, but it wasn't really my profile. I was the guy from that company. So I had the strength of this company, So I could go in, I could say, hi, I'm Richard Maybury from Norwich Winterthur Insurance Company. And people would know, hi, I'm the guy from, I run this department or this division in Manette Insurance Brokers. Wow, people would know, all right? And all of a sudden, I was out in the world and I was saying, hi, I'm Richard Maybury from Attitude Solutions. And nobody cared.
And?
And, yeah, what are you trying to sell? No. Hi, I'm Richard Maybury. What are you trying to sell? No. And it was really, 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 it was a wake-up call, because we do, for better or for worse, we define ourselves by our role. We define ourselves by a lot of things outside of just ourselves. And what I found was that very quickly was that I didn't have a training business at all. What I had was a selling business that actually sold training. And I think that most people who start a small business are accidental salespeople, because they've got a passion for what they want to do, but they don't realize, they might realize intellectually, but experientially and viscerally, they don't realize that the job is selling, and that every now and again, they get the privilege of delivering what they've sold. And I speak to loads of SME owners and people starting out, and they say, I've got a real passion for design. And I say, well, how equal is your passion for selling design? Because if your passion for selling design is not as equal as your passion for design, then you're going to look at spending £40,000 plus a year to get somebody whose passion is selling to give you work to design on. But if you're going to do it on your own, you better develop a passion for selling, without mentioning the word passion, by the way.
Or selling.
Because if you talk to somebody about my passion is, they'll say, I don't care what your passion is. So it was realizing that starting a business, it can be very lonely, and it certainly was. B, starting a business is all about selling, and then every now and again having the privilege to deliver what you've sold. And C, starting a business is all about belief and resilience, because nobody else in the world cares or believes in you. And your life partner, if you have one, might, because they're invested in your enterprise. Your friends will pat you on the back and say, good on you, keep going. But it is about belief and resilience. Belief, resilience, and selling, and then occasionally doing what you've sold. I think that's the pattern.
And how did you find that transition? Because selling is the one thing that pretty much everybody, well, unless they are somebody who is the salesperson and who is, that is their background or their strength. But pretty much everybody else, selling is the bit that they least like and are most resistant to and find the most challenging. So how was that for you?
Well, I was in a sales type role in various, and when you're a country manager for an organization, you are the chief salesperson. You've got salespeople, but people want to be talking to, the boss, the CEO, the senior person in that territory, in that organization. So, most MDs, whether they've got employees who sell or not, are also the chief salesperson for their business. That's what happens. So the selling side itself wasn't necessarily massively hard. What was hard was that I was having to sell without the reputation of an organization behind me. And I think most people who leave employment with a good company to go out on their own, they underestimate how much they depend upon the brand and the recognition and the kudos that attaches to their previous employer, as opposed to just themselves. And I've seen this with great salespeople as well, because great salespeople are very good at selling the business that they're employed by, but not necessarily at selling a different business when it's smaller and hasn't got the credibility. So I've seen loads of salespeople in big organizations go to smaller company startups and fail because they haven't got the infrastructure, they haven't got the brand recognition, they haven't got the kudos that they can use to sell. And what I found was nobody really cared about Richard Maybury. Nobody cared about my little training business until I was able to demonstrate that it was worthwhile talking with me. And as I say, lots of small business owners are accidental salespeople, and they need to either recognize that they've got to get good at that stuff and be genuine. No sales tricks, just be very genuine, but be engaged in sales activity, as well as the privilege of being able to deliver what they've sold. I was on a gondolier.
As you are.
On a gondolier. As you are. I was on a gondolier going up to Blackcomb in Whistler years ago. And when you got to Blackcomb, it's just north of Vancouver there. When you got to Blackcomb, it's a long ride, right? And I was in this gondolier, and you talk with the person beside you, and this guy was in sales, and just from the minute or so that he was talking about his business and everything else, I realized it was a big, successful business. And so I said, like you always do, so what do you put down the secret? I'm just starting out, what do you put down the secret of your success to? And he looked me in the eye and he said, Richard, you got to tell your story to 4 different people every day. And I thought, is that it? And he said, yep, tell your story to 4 different people every day. And of course I thought, well, I could do that, but actually doing that when you're running a small business is hard. And that doesn't count networking, by the way. It doesn't count having a nice cup of coffee or a warm glass of white wine and a curly sandwich at a networking meeting. That's not selling, that's networking. Making 4 sales appointments a day when you're starting your business to sell something that you can work on. And that was a lesson. Yeah.
Because it's that putting yourself out there, isn't it?
Yeah. In a sales position, not in a networking position. There's a whole pile of SME owners who it's a lonely place, especially when you're starting out. And a whole pile of SME owners go to a lot of networking events because it's company. And that's okay. But let's not kid ourselves that going to a networking event is going to deliver sales results, because it's not in early stage. Anyway.
No, and I know my view of networking is very much that I don't expect the person that I'm speaking to necessarily be my prospective sales. It's the person that they know, that once they've built up that relationship with me and they know me, and then they're going, oh, actually, I know somebody who can do that. But that's not a short-term quick win, is it? That's a long-term.
No, it's not. And people say that, and people say, so I'm going to work at this networking thing, but that's a long pipeline. Is. That's a long pipeline. And in between times, you're probably looking at going through your second credit card limit. And I did get onto my second credit card. When I started my business, I had a £10,000 overdraft from the bank, and I had 2 reserve credit cards. And I wasn't going to throw any more money into it. So if I was going to borrow money, I had to pay it back. I wasn't going to put my hard-earned savings from 15 years overseas into this. If it was going to work, it was going to work on its own. And yeah, it got to the point where I was starting to look at my second credit card because expenses were mounting up and the revenue wasn't coming in as much as it needed to come in. So again, you have to sort of say, well, this is all well and good, but what am I not doing? And what I found I wasn't doing was selling enough. I was going to all these networking events and I was having these wonderful conversations with people who might introduce me to people, but they did materialize eventually, some of them. But any business is only as good as its sales numbers, and if you're not generating revenue now, you haven't got a future. So that woke me up when I started selling again. Get real, Rich. Get real.
And how did you find, so when you're starting to look at that second credit card and you're thinking, okay, this isn't happening, how was life around that? How was your wife or your partner and the children? How was that all holding up? Was that starting to see signs of stress as well, or were you able to balance that?
Not really, because I guess I was fortunate, Deborah. We had 15 years of an expatriate sort of life, wonderful salary, the potential to save loads of money tax free. So we had a buffer. We had more than a buffer, but I wasn't going to risk that stuff. So it wasn't like we were destitute, or it wasn't like we were under severe financial pressure. I put the pressure on myself because I didn't want to just start drip feeding, that money into this business. I wanted the business to either stand up or not. So I was rigorous with myself on that level. And I think that's something that everyone who's starting out has to do, because the easiest thing to do is to say, I've got X amount of redundancy money. I've got Y amount of savings. So I'll just carry on and I'll use my redundancy money or I'll use my savings because it will happen. Well, it'll only happen if you sell. If you don't sell, it won't happen as quickly as you need it to happen. So I put myself in that position. I'll get an overdraft. I'll put some money in. I'll seed it with some of my money, but it either stands or falls. So, it didn't have a massive impact on the family. We still had a great lifestyle. But I realized that the revenue wasn't equaling, the outgoing. And it was because I started to, focus on one or two customers, which is lovely. But one or two customers don't make a business. And one of those dried up. I've still got one of my first customers, by the way. Almost 20 years, a big American corporation, almost 20 years after a cold call. And as one of the longest training providers to the company, we have a degree of kudos with that organization. But, I was focusing on a handful of clients, and that wasn't going to make the business. So again, I had to realize that I had to get more serious with myself and do what this guy on the gondolier and Whistler told me to do and get back out on the road and tell my story to 4 people every day. And that's what then started to make the difference, because I started to get back into a sales mode as opposed to a networking and a farming my existing accounts mode. I still network, I still farm, but I still actually go out and hunt a little bit. Because, actually it's quite fun hunting down an opportunity.
Well, it's rewarding when it comes through, isn't it? Finding that opportunity and bringing it to you. But so what I'm hearing, Richard, and I'm not biased in any way being a Canadian myself, but it sounds like your success is down to a Canadian.
Oh, it was down to a person on a gondolier and Whistler. That's a big leap. Actually, I think he was from Kentucky.
No, he was Canadian. Just ignore that bit. So just moving on a little bit, because obviously, the business is doing well now. And I know, because I met you through the Institute of Directors in Surrey. And that's my feeling is that that's something that you're really quite, you believe in strongly, if I'm reading you correctly when I see you.
Yes. I joined the IOD in 2005, and I I first went to the IOD through a good business friend, and we had a meeting up in Pall Mall. And it's an impressive place, you know. And I thought, oh, I could join this. This could be good. And it was only when I went to the regular meeting in Surrey, in Guildford, that we call the 859. And I went there the first time and I thought, wow, here is, because I was doing that networking thing. And I thought, wow, here is a community. The big difference for me between the IOD 859 in Surrey and normal networking is that the 859 is a community happy to share ideas, insights, experiences, not just business cards and sales opportunities. So I became a big supporter of the IOD. I joined, and I've been a massive advocate for what the IOD stands for in terms of learning, continuous development, never accepting the status quo, pushing forward, accountability and responsibility, good board governance, good small to medium business governance, good individual consultant governance. All these things spoke to my being, really. So the IOD just spoke to me on that level. And then I got to serve on the committee. And now for my sins, I won the privilege of being chair of IOD Surrey for the next 3 years. And I don't take that lightly. I'm the temporary custodian of the chair role, and I'm very aware that I've got great people before me, and my job really is to leave that chair role in a better sort of position than I inherited it, in the same way as people who you and I know developed the role and left it in a better place for me to take it over. So yes, I'm a massive fan of the IOD. It is the one subscription every year that I do not even blink at paying. I have killed loads of subscriptions, certainly since 2008, when the whole world changed. I got rid of loads of subscriptions, but the one that I never even thought twice about was my subscription to the IOD.
Well, and it's, my main exposure to the Surrey branch is the 859 Club. And I think I've told you this before, that, I'm not a morning person. So I'm quite selective about what morning things I go to. And I can remember kind of dragging myself along with a business buddy. And we were both thinking, we better go and try it out, sort of thing, and dragged ourselves along. And then we didn't actually speak for another couple of weeks. And she said to me, "Oh, what did you think?" And I said, "Yeah, I really liked it." And she said, "Yeah, so did I. I guess we should go again." And we were quite depressed because it was kind of like, it's early morning, but it's really, as you said, it's a community. It's a nice feel. And I like the fact that you're having a chat and there's that bit of structure. And it was like, I guess we're going to have to get up,
Love it. Love it. Love it. Oh, love it.
But all of that you do for the IOD, that's volunteering, isn't it?
Oh yeah, total volunteering. Yeah. It's alongside the day job.
So between volunteering and doing lots of stuff for the IOD, and being, married, father of 2 sons who are now, sounds like they're out in the world doing their own thing, but also still running your business and clearly actively, moving with that. How do you how do you make sure that you're looking after yourself and that you're finding time for that, that work-life balance that we all aspire to?
How do I do that? Probably not as well as I should. By the way, philosophically, I don't believe that a work-life balance is a reality. I think it's a fantasy these days. A work-life balance might have been okay back in the day. And lots of our clients, especially the HR people, L&D people, they want us to talk about work-life balance, and I do. And I still think that the whole idea of being able to go into work at a set hour and come out at a set hour, whether you're working for a corporation or a fast-growing SME or for yourself, I think that's a fantasy. So I think it's much more about work-life integration, and I think it's about carving out necessary time for necessary elements. There's nothing wrong with doing emails at 10 o'clock at night, as long as you've had time with the kids and they are now put to bed and you've got an hour to do stuff to make tomorrow easier. There is nothing wrong with that at all. And that's the way it's going to be, because sooner or later, someone else is going to take that role. It's going to be AI'd, or it's going to be exported, or it's going to be outsourced. And that's the ruthless reality. So I think work-life integration is real important. And like most SME owners, with some notable exceptions that you and I will know, with notable exceptions, most SME owners probably put themselves last.
Yes.
And that's all right for a short period of time, but every now and again, you just got to say, who am I kidding? Let's do something different here. We're going to have a break, or we're going to do this, or we're going to reward ourselves in some way. So I think if most SME owners are honest with themselves, they would say that they sometimes put themselves last, and I'm very conscious that the past 3 days, today's Thursday, isn't it?
It is.
Today's Thursday. Okay. So I'm very conscious that for the past 3 days, although I've done over 10,000 steps, that's been in a training room, and in between times, I've sat down in the IOD Executive Lounge in Newcastle Airport, which is wonderful. And I've sat down in airplanes, and I've sat down in offices, and I've sat down in my hotel bedroom. And I came back on an airplane and I sat down, and here I am sitting down again today, talking with you. And, will I do what I need to do later on today to sort of, move myself around? Probably not, because I've got a shed load of work to do and I'm out all day tomorrow. So, it is hard. It is hard to do what you should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I agree with that completely. And interestingly, one of my guests back in season 1, Tom Watson, he also talks about work-life integration. And that need to go, well, actually today I need to go to my grandson's, play. So yes, I'm doing that, but it's not, it might mean that he's sending emails at 10 o'clock or whatever. But I think we do. So I strongly believe in needing to take care of yourself, because if you do continue to put yourself last and you're always just pushing away, then at some point you're not going to be able to continue, or not as effectively and as productively as you need to, and that ultimately will impact your business and also the rest of your life, around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that's one of the foundational principles as well of Stephen Covey, Covey's 7 Habits, and he talks about, doesn't he, the difference between productivity and productive capacity. And I'm a firm believer in sort of, hence the learning thing. I'm a firm believer in rebuilding and reinforcing that productive capacity so that we can be productive. And I fully recognise that today is Thursday, and I've been sedentary. I've been sedentary since Monday night. Apart from pacing around a meeting room for 2 days, I've been pretty sedentary since Monday night. And there's zero hope of me doing anything else today apart from just knuckling down and getting stuff out, and getting stuff ready for the next few days.
So do you find, because you mentioned to me about going scuba diving, just sort of you come home from work in Mombasa and pop out, do a bit of scuba diving. And you've also said something about scuba diving meant Kilimanjaro. So 2 things. So 1, telling me about that, but 2, also, is scuba diving part of your life still? So just the 2 aspects.
Okay, so myself and Jackie love scuba diving. And when we were going on, we've had the privilege and the pleasure of living near the Indian Ocean, scuba diving that, once a week, probably once every 2 weeks, definitely. We've had the privilege of being able to dive in the Red Sea almost every week, because we were living in Jeddah. Mm-hmm. And with an expatriate lifestyle, almost everywhere we went was predicated upon blue ocean, beautiful coral reef, scuba diving holidays, kids snorkeling above, us scuba diving. So, and then when we came back, we still had scuba diving holidays. We brought our kids out to Turkey to learn scuba on a Turkish holiday. So yeah, I mean, scuba diving is definitely part of what I am. The whole thing with Mount Kilimanjaro is because, of course, if you're living in Africa, if you're living in East Africa, you've got to climb Mount Kenya and you've got to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, that's a given. You've got to go safaris. Yeah, you've got to do all that. But what very few people know is that halfway up Kilimanjaro, there's a glacial lake, and so every year the Impala British Sub Aqua Club used to go on a safari halfway up Mount Kilimanjaro simply to scuba dive in Lake Chala. So that's what we did. So anyone can climb Mount Kilimanjaro, but very few people have scuba dived it.
It's because I had no idea. I've obviously heard of it, and climbing it, but never anybody scuba diving it. And I didn't know. I was thinking, so where have you scuba dived?
Yeah, you got to go off the beaten track, and you got to go. You actually temporarily cross over into Tanzania, and then sort of come back in again. And of course, there's no barrier; it's just mountain. And then you arrive at Lake Chala, and freshwater mountain glacial lake. Pretty boring, but you got to do it.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things that you do for the overall experience, not necessarily for what you're seeing in there.
Yeah, and it's camping with a great bunch of people, and it's the safari run all the way down, and it's the joy of doing it, and then the achievement of having done it. So yeah, so it was so good. It was so good we did it twice.
So, Richard, just before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share, whether that's towards sort of other aspiring business owners or people trying to start up, or people who are maybe struggling to keep on top of things? Just anything that you could say to kind of offer them some guidance.
Okay, well, that's a really, really good question, and I'll preface it by saying that I'm not the best person in the world to give advice. I've got scars on my back. I've made tons of mistakes. I could write out a list of regrets, as well as having a wonderful life to date. So I'm not necessarily giving advice here. But what I would say, from my experience, is that if you're thinking about going out and doing stuff on your own, the first and most important thing you've got to do is understand who you are and what it is you're about to undertake and why you're about to undertake it. Because if you don't understand deeply who you are and what you're about to undertake and why you're going to undertake it, then you will probably be pursuing a passion that you're not able to deliver enough to sustain the business. The second thing I would say to myself, if I was doing this again, is never underestimate the fact that what you're getting into is a lonely, initially solo sales operation. And every now and again, when you sell stuff, you might be able to do the stuff you love. But don't kid yourself that you are getting into a business that is going to drive your passion, because it's empty until somebody buys it off you. So whatever your business is, it's a sales business, and you've got to sell to do the stuff you love. And being an accidental salesperson around that stuff isn't enough. You won't generate the level of income that you deserve to build your life around that business. You've got to understand the business dynamic of sales and costs and net. And don't put your own hard-earned money into it unless you're sure that you've got a strategy to make it work.
That is really great information, Richard. Thank you. And I think, you were saying about, having the scars. I think that is part of having a business. So I think that somebody who has the scars and the experience is actually the person to talk to other businesses, because you've been there, the challenges. And I haven't spoken to anybody who has said, oh, it was smooth sailing, everything went perfectly. I don't think that's reality. No,
certainly isn't.
So, Richard, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
My great pleasure. It's been wonderful, actually. You've pulled a few things out of me, you have.
Sorry about that.
Good.
I will, for anybody who's listening, I will put up Richard's contact details and just a little bit more information about him as well. And you can get in touch with him at any point. So thank you again, Richard.
My great pleasure. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you. I've been in conversation with Richard Maybury, also known as Mr. Productivity of Attitude Solutions. You can reach Richard at richardm@attitude-solutions.com. Full details, including phone numbers, websites, etc., will be available on the show notes. Now is an absolutely amazing time to start your own podcast. There's a whole new burst of energy and revitalization surrounding the whole world of audio at this point in time. To help you to get started and to really launch your podcast properly, I'm putting together a podcast launcher. It's just about done. It should be out in the next couple of days. So if you'd like to know more about it and find out the full details, just go to launch.bridginggaps.uk. That's launch.bridginggaps.uk, and I'll send you all of the details. Bridging Gaps, the business podcast, was produced by Deborah Levitt of Bridge Road Consultants Limited, with original music provided by Pete Dineley.
You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the business podcast.